Budget and Finance Committee meeting. I'm glad to be back. Just want to say that. Also, committee members, I asked the council office staff and IT to work with our agendas so that our agendas are displayed on your tablets throughout Budget and Finance Committee meetings. So I hope you are enjoying that. And with that said, we will begin with resolutions. RS 2018-1485, sponsor Vircher and Freeman, approves an amendment to a grant from a Tennessee Department of Finance and Administration to the Office of Family Safety for Family Justice Center Navigator position. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2018-1486, sponsor Vircher and Freeman, approves an agreement between the United States Department of Justice and the Metro Nashville Police Department governing the participation of DEA Nashville District Office Task Force participants in the United States Department of Justice Equitable Sharing Program. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. We have some discussion. Councilman Mendez, at large. Let's see. Wait a minute, look like Councilman Freeman left some of y'all in the queue. Councilman Mendez.
Thank you. I don't know whether this is a question for Mr. Jameson or I don't know if
we have Captain Alexander here. You can come on down to the podium.
I want to get clarity. I hardly ever abstain on something of substance. I abstained on this last year in the council meeting, and part of it was because I was confused about the nature of the program. Is this a program where property can be permanently seized prior to a criminal conviction?
Captain Alexander, who's here at the podium, has been very helpful in our workup of the analysis. At the time of the drafting of the analysis, we did not have the answer to this specific question. 100% of those cases in which the Metro Police Department has engaged in equitable sharing involved A, a drug nexus, and B, an arrest. The follow-up question, and I've relayed this to Captain Alexander, that at least 2 council members have relayed, was what percentage of those involve an actual criminal conviction? Again, as of press time and through my email today, we do not yet have that answer. From other resources, it has been indicated that it is not required, a criminal conviction is not required to participate in the equitable sharing programs. What the percentage is that the Metro Police Department engages in that never involves a conviction, I do not yet know. You'll see other statistics from other programs across the country that in many instances, a majority do not involve an eventual conviction, but I would defer to Captain Alexander.
Captain Alexander.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, and appreciate it. Captain Mike Alexander with Specialized Investigations Division, for those of you who may not know me or I may not have met before. So, again, we have reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office to try to get a more definitive number in terms of all of the joint cases that we are working under this agreement that actually result in a conviction. Obviously, these are federal cases, so these are tracked more for those type issues at the federal level through the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney's Office, so we're trying to get a better answer for that. I can tell you that just from our officers and detectives that are involved in these cases, that are involved throughout the case until it ultimately comes to fruition, that's a very high conviction rate. And I know we don't really like to give estimates, but well up into the 90s as far as these cases. Again, these are significant cases that involve a very large amount of drugs that involve us working with the DEA to try to intercept a significant amount of heroin and fentanyl, primarily lately, before it ever reaches the streets of Nashville. So again, and most of you probably know this, but you know, we have participated in equitable sharing since 1990, so it's been a long-term thing. It's not something new that's just coming up. So quite frankly, if we have personnel that are involved in working a case that has a Nashville connection, it is one way for us to receive some proceeds from a money seizure that was made by the DEA so that we can turn around and invest that particular money source into combating our opioid crisis here in Nashville. So, you know, I'm quite certain that if we did not participate in the program, number one, we still have to do what we need to do regardless. And two, you know, maybe the federal government would end up keeping the small share that we ended up getting. So again, it is helpful to us and what we're trying to do here in the city. I will tell you that our share request involved money that was seized. To my knowledge, we've never received any real property from anyone involved in any of these cases. That has just been my experience. So, you know, this initiative, as you all probably know as well, has passed with overwhelming support for almost the last 30 years. But this year, I felt it incumbent upon myself to try to get around and talk to some of you all out of fairness to try to explain exactly what the program is, why we're involved in it, and what we do with it. So again, you know, everything's highly regulated, and we're talking about one detective of ours that's assigned to the DEA task force, which is approved by you all as well. And this just happens to involve cases that we work with the DEA, but it's a significant amount of drugs, and quite frankly, our fatal overdose rate, which I've shared with some of you, is quite staggering here in our city. Since January of 2017, we've had 538 people in Davidson County that have died from a heroin drug overdose. So, you know, a lot of reason to be concerned. So again, each one of these cases involves a significant amount of drugs that we feel is very harmful to the community. So they're worthy of our fight, if you will, and we've got to continue that effort in any way that we can.
And thank you very much. Mr. Jameson, one follow-up question. As I understand the analysis, even when there is a conviction, the permanent seizure of personal property would happen prior to the conviction.
That is correct. So back up a little bit. All of the asset sharing and forfeitures are eventually subject to the discretion of the U.S. Attorney General. The timeline under these programs is such that the local jurisdiction, the Metro Police Department, for example, has to make the request for their share within 60 days of the seizure of the asset. 60 days to, I think most criminal defense lawyers in here, is the drop of a tick of a clock. That's not much time to have determined the actual outcome of the case. And so that's why, again, from online sources, you'll see that a large number of these programs that involve a majority that involve no eventual actual criminal conviction. Certainly an arrest, certainly a drug nexus, but in terms of what that percentage is here in Nashville, we don't yet know. And as you heard Captain Alexander here, we're waiting to hear that from the U.S. Department of Justice.
So my summary is somebody gets arrested, charged with a crime. Within the first couple months, there's a move to permanently seize their personal property while the criminal case is pending. That becomes final on a preponderance of evidence sometime in the future. Anecdotally, perhaps 90% of those people actually get convicted of a crime?
That's my understanding.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mendez. Captain, we have a lot of discussion, so if you can just...
Sure.
I'll recognize committee members first, and Councilman Sledge, I'll come back to you. Councilman Pridemore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commander, if I could, mind if I direct my question?
Absolutely.
Commander, last year, and members of this committee, there may have been some confusion about the actual program because of news coverage of something similar about the time of this legislation coming available last year. Could you please, number one, just explain the difference in this program versus the one they showed on the media outlets last year pertaining to interstate interdiction units, the small police departments being involved in a task force? And then second, if you would, the type of seizures you have had, they said that you have to initiate some sort of seizure statement before they're convicted. The type of defendants that the United States government is dealing with is not the typical street dealer. If you would just elaborate on that one, and also the first question about the difference between the two.
Sure. Yes, sir. Thank you. And I do think you're right. I think there was maybe some confusion between the civil asset forfeiture as it relates to the state side that's governed by the Tennessee Department of Safety, where a case may come up I won't say less significant, a smaller amount of drugs that may have involved some sort of interaction, a small amount of drugs taken, some property seized. That type of scenario would move up through the Tennessee Department of Safety through the state safeguards as well. This equitable sharing program is specifically on the federal side for cases that narcotics detectives out of our division work with the DEA because the case has become so large in terms of the amount of drugs involved that there's sometimes a nexus well beyond Nashville, of course, but there is one in Nashville. Obviously, I make sure of that every time, but beyond Nashville, it moves to the state of Tennessee, and quite frankly, a lot of times out of the state of Tennessee. So we need that DEA resource in terms of really tying in, multiple $1 million worth of drugs that are ultimately finding their way to Nashville. So that's what these cases involve. These are long-term investigations. When I talk about equitable sharing that we're asking to be approved, I'm talking about long-term cases that, quite frankly, usually involve several months, sometimes a year or more, of a long-term investigation that ultimately ties in a person that is dealing drugs at the very large scale effort of how we would term it. And by that, I mean a very significant amount of drugs with the ultimate goal, destination being Nashville and our communities and our neighborhoods. So some of the examples, just to let you know, we recently seized enough fentanyl here in Nashville that we estimate it could have been lethal up to 1 million people. The population of the county is about 680 or so. So just to try to put that in perspective, and that wasn't a case anywhere else. That was a Nashville seizure that we did with the DEA. So, this involves multiple pounds of heroin, enough fentanyl to kill, hundreds of thousands of people. That's what we're combating with these type of cases. And quite frankly, we end up putting quite a bit of manpower and effort into these cases. So that's one way we can turn around and try to continue to fight the drug traffic as a result of this equitable sharing agreement. Of course, everything's ultimately decided and awarded. That's out of our hands. That's on the federal side of the system. If it ultimately gets awarded at some point and we've submitted a share request, that's when we would normally get that. And sometimes that takes 2 or 3 years, quite frankly, even regarding one case before we ever end up seeing that. But out of fairness to your question, there is a big difference between the state asset system that moves up through the Tennessee Department of Safety and this federal equitable sharing system of what I'm talking about. So there were some policing for profit stories being run last year that involved some interdiction officers on the interstate, and those were not our officers, but I understand those stories were being run. And quite frankly, we've got a finance manager at our division that's putting together a PowerPoint and a short video. Of course, if you all would entertain that idea, we would like to come and showcase what that state process is, just to explain the difference. And some of you may be very well aware of it, but we would like to show the state side that moves up through the Tennessee Department of Safety and explain what that involves and what that is. But I guess the main distinction I'm trying to make is that is completely separate and different from this federal equitable sharing type of agreement that quite frankly involves a staggering amount of drugs that end up here in our city. So, there's always a Nashville connection, there's always an arrest, and there's always a large drug nexus. So the officer we have assigned to the DEA task force right now, his name is Mark Anderson. He's been assigned there for 5 years. Every single case that he's been involved in has involved an arrest and a significant amount of lethal drugs. So this is well beyond just the seizing of property without tying anything else into it. Everything else is tied into it before the seizures ever occur. But again, this is all regulated on the federal side as far as the court system, the adjudication system, and anything that may be ultimately awarded. We are completely out of that process beyond asking for a small share if something is awarded, because we put time and effort into it, and quite frankly, we've got a significant challenge right here in our own city that we can't let go of. So.
Thank you, Commander. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Roden.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if this should be sent to finance or to the chief. I was just wondering what the financial impact of this program has been to the budget historically. I know it says in our financial fiscal report that it's about $150,000, but do we have the actual numbers historically for like the last 10 years showing what we're getting out of this program?
We can ask Mr. Harmon. I don't know if they have that, Vice Chair, but we can ask. Mr. Harmon?
Chair Roden, we do not have that information with us here today, but perhaps the MMPD would have that
Captain, do
historically.
you have it?
I would have to get back with you and get the exact numbers. We did a 20-year baseline average, just so you know, that looked from 1994 to 2014. And if we had to put an average on it, we get about $150,000 a year from this program. Understanding this is drug work and significant drug work, the cases ebb and flow and fluctuate very much. So, you know, it would be hard to put an exact number, but to give everybody just a baseline idea, that's the average, we would say. And in a time when, quite frankly, the department, you know, doesn't receive much increase as far as an operating budget, those funds become very important. And again, they're highly regulated as well on exactly what they can be spent on, regulated at the federal end. But Narcan, for example, you know, we've got 732 Narcan kits distributed to Metro police officers. They've used them 7 times to save somebody's life. The interesting thing about Narcan, it has a 1-year shelf life, so that's going to be, you know, a recurring expense for us. Our division gets called out to meth labs, to dismantle meth labs. That's a highly involved process of time and effort, decontamination, those suits and tanks and certifications, that kind of training. Funds become important to do those kind of things. I checked with the fire department, just was interesting to me because I know they get on the scene a lot of times before we do and are involved in the medical side of it. Obviously, they've administered Narcan in our county about 530 times this year alone. So I'm just trying to showcase that most people wouldn't realize, and you wouldn't know it unless somebody told you. Nobody would be expected to know that. But, you know, when we're administering Narcan between 500 and 600 times, and we hadn't even got through the calendar year yet, you know, it's a significant challenge beyond what we probably all even realize. So my point is, those funds, you know, it's not millions and millions of dollars, but whatever it is, we certainly put it to good use. Again, not for the state or the federal government, but for this city.
Thank you, Chair.
Councilman Pulley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. Number one, I don't believe that failure of this resolution will keep you out of what you're doing right now. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So the work will be going on as it's being conducted right now. The only thing this resolution does is allow us to share in the proceeds. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Also, you've already alluded to a lot of the really heinous crimes that you guys are working as a part of this task force in association with which these seizures occur. Are there any crimes that you work that would be similar to somebody going through an airport with a wad full of money and getting that money seized on their way to Houston without any really substantive criminal basis to go along with that?
No, sir, there would not. There would
Okay.
always be something else tied into it. If not, it would just be considered abandoned property at the most.
I got you. Okay. And civil asset forfeiture as opposed to criminal, Mr. Jamison, you can allude to this, and Mr. Cooper, you can as well. I'm sure that there is a burden of proof that goes with that. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
So it's not like somebody can take somebody's property, the government can take somebody's property without some kind of a basis that has to be proved in order to do so. I would say that I'm a strong proponent of the asset forfeiture program, both civil and criminal, and I'll tell you a little bit of a few of the reasons why. When I was in the FBI, I worked some joint cases with Metro, several of which involved asset forfeiture. Metro was worked up cases, and we had some organized crime cases where we had some really bad actors who were doing bad things and making all of their money through the proceeds of their ill-gotten gains. So Metro placed local charges against them, but didn't have appropriate forfeiture proceedings to really get at the heart of what would really attack this criminal enterprise, and that's taking their money away from them. You can look at their tax returns and see they did nothing other than the money that they gained from this criminal enterprise. So we stepped in and helped them and shared the forfeiture proceedings with them, seized their, and the things, the items we seized were properties that were purchased that we could prove were purchased with these ill-gotten gains, and money that was stuffed away in safe deposit boxes that we could prove was money that was gained from this criminal activity. So all of that we had to prove in order to seize that money, but that's what put these guys out of business, not being charged with the criminal counts that they were charged with, because that didn't really put them away. But what put them out of business was a civil asset forfeiture, getting all of the things that they really purchased, their livelihood, and taking that away from them. And they went and did something else after it was all over. So civil asset forfeiture is a vital component of the judicial system and the judicial process. And so I just wanted to put that in there because what these guys are doing, they're talking about bad actors that they're dealing with here. And I think civil and criminal asset forfeiture is a very important component of what they do. And for those reasons, among others, I support this resolution.
Thank you so much, Agent Pulley. Councilman Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to circle back for a second to the Councilman at Large Mendez's question and statements before about the program. So we originally have been involved in this program since about 1990, Chief?
Yes, sir.
30
Okay.
years.
And the other part of that is more to both that question and my colleague, Councilman Pulley, a moment ago, just for clarity. So the assets that are being seized prior to a conviction, and we don't have the statistics or the numbers yet of conviction versus arrest. So I guess my question is, with asset seizure happening at arrest and prior to conviction, is this the first time since 1990 we've asked for those numbers or that information has been requested?
As far as I know, yes, sir. I've been in my current assignment for 6 years now, and to my knowledge, that's the first time that's ever been requested. And to be quite frank with you, I think up until last year, the participation that you all approved as far as allowing one of our officers to participate with the DEA, that and equitable sharing was included as one agreement. This time they're separated out, which may or may not have made some people pay more attention to one or the other, but I'm just saying that may have created some additional questions, which is understandable when they got separated out. But like I said, the agreement's almost 3 decades in place. And obviously, again, our number one directive to our people on these significant joint cases is to find the drugs and find the drugs before they reach our city and before that the actual dealers have a chance to disseminate them throughout this city, because at that point we've in essence lost to a big degree. So my point is, if a seizure happens to be upon the result of us finding those drugs, and we obviously have evidence and reason to believe, probable cause to believe that money is tied into those drugs that we've located, then the seizure obviously takes place on the front end. But after that, in these cases, we simply sit and let the federal judicial system ultimately decide if anything's awarded or not. And if it is, we make our share request, which, by the way, is about 10% usually of the entire amount that was seized. I think 15 maybe is the highest I've ever seen, but it's a 10 to 15% share.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Captain. You've been putting this really, really politely. So, committee members, this is about large seizures. This is about drug traffickers. Earlier in this week, local agencies, along with federal agencies down in Florida, seized about $500 million worth of cocaine. So these joint partnerships that they're doing is not what we think of small level crime. These are large seizures. This is proactive measures to prevent these type of trafficking to come to our city. Councilman Sledge. Large seizures, please keep that in mind.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate you letting me speak, even though I'm not on the committee. And the captain has been very proactive in reaching out to me, and I think we're going to speak again tomorrow afternoon. I just had a couple of quick questions so I understand the process. So regardless of what we do as a body, whether we participate in the equitable sharing portion, the asset seizure will continue. Is that correct?
The asset seizure would continue as far as the DEA is concerned. You know, if equitable sharing was not approved here at this level, I think we would still be permitted to be involved in equitable sharing, but I'm sure that a no vote obviously may hamper us from even being able to do so, would be my understanding.
Okay, and I want to understand, you had mentioned we've got that average figure that you gave on the number of funds essentially over the last 20 years. Right. Do you have a sense, and you don't have to provide it today if you don't have it, but a sense of how many requests are typically made that the city is basically putting in to say, hey, we are a claimant in this issue? How many of those average a year?
I can get that for you.
Okay,
Good question. That's something I can track down for you. I think I have read information before compared to other cities. Ours is probably quite a bit lower, but I'll get that number for you.
Okay, and the last question I had, Chair, is you mentioned the 150,000 and you mentioned the Narcan kits and everything we're having. That money, the money that comes from the equitable sharing, is it earmarked at all, or does it go basically into the general fund or your general budget that then gets appropriated?
Okay, yes, sir. It does not go into the MMPD operating budget or any governmental budget per se. It goes into a special fund that we call the Justice Fund. It's a drug fund that's highly regulated at the federal level in terms of specifically how and what agencies can use that money for. So, again, obviously, it's very helpful to us in terms of equipment needed, in terms of certifications, in terms of training. And, you know, I kind of equate the narcotics detectives world to the IT world in terms of, you know, we've got, one, from a safety perspective, two, we've got to keep our detectives on the front edge of trying to learn how to be better at intercepting the drugs versus the drug dealers that are trying to get it here. So there's a lot of training involved and a lot of certifications and things like that. So when we do get it, it's very, very helpful. As Councilman Pulley said, we would still be obligated to try to do this regardless, but it's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. Seeing no more further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? We'll need a show of hands. All in favor?
2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8.
Did you get your own? Okay. Opposed?
1, 2, 2.
Resolution is recommended. RS 2018-1487, thank you, Captain Alexander. RS 2018-1487 sponsors Virtue and Freeman, approves an intergovernmental agreement between the Metro Police Department and Tennessee State University for extra duty police services. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2018-1488, sponsor Virtue, authorizes the Metro Department of Law to compromise and settle the claims of Dan and Sandy Feltner against Metro government in the amount of $175,000. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2018-1489, sponsor Virtue, authorizes the Metro Department of Law to compromise and settle the claims of Roger Gordon and Dahlia McLeod, I don't know, against Metro government in the amount of $28,777.87. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2018-1490, sponsors Mina Johnson, and O'Connell, approves an intergovernmental agreement between the Tennessee Department of Transportation and Metro for the acceptance of Hillwood Boulevard Bridge rehabilitation over CSX Railroad and Richland Creek. There is a letter from the sponsor for approval. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. RS 2018-1492, sponsors Vercher and Gilmore, approves a contract between the Metro Board of Health and Monroe Harding to hire one part-time administrative assistant for the Adverse Childhood Experiences Nashville initiatives. Is there a motion? It's been moved and properly seconded. Councilwoman Allen.
Thank you. I just want to point out that at ACE in this particular case stands for All Children Excel is the name of the organization, and it deals with ACEs, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences.
Thank you so
For
much,
the record.
Councilwoman.
Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? Resolution is recommended. Now we're on bills on second reading. And we have BL 2018-1283, sponsors Murphy, Henderson, Johnson, Mina Johnson, amends the Metro Code to restrict the use of proceeds from the sale of real property owned by Metro government. Councilwoman Murphy.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. I'm not on the committee, so I think someone else needs to.
I believe you have some amendments.
Thank you, and I have amendments that I would like a friend to move as well. Thank you. I don't know if they're on your, are they on your desks? Okay.
One moment,
sorry.
Councilwoman Murphy, just for point of order. Is that motion for all your amendments?
No.
Okay, we're just doing Amendment A?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Oh, I found them. Sorry, mine were not numbered. I found them now. Yes, so if we can start with Amendment A, and I will apologize. I thought when I put this bill back on the agenda, because I was sick, which made it indefinitely deferred. Now we're back on the agenda. I didn't realize that the amendments traveled with it, and so I'll be asking for a suspension of the rules tomorrow because I have made that error, not realizing they traveled. So Amendment A is primarily an amendment between the administration and I putting together, kind of cleaning some things up and making sure that back property taxes, so if somebody doesn't pay their taxes and it goes up for sale, those are smaller amounts, making sure that is not those properties are not captured in this legislation. So I would appreciate y'all's approval.
Okay, so we're on Amendment A. It's been moved and properly seconded. We'll go ahead and vote on Amendment A. All in favor? Opposed? Amendment is recommended.
Thank you. Amendment B, it's pretty simple. It says that this, the effective date of this is next July 1st.
Of 2019.
Of 2019.
Seeing no discussion, all in favor on Amendment B? Opposed? Okay, Amendment B is recommended.
And then Amendment C appears to be a housekeeping bill. A housekeeping amendment.
Okay. Amendment C has been moved and seconded. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Opposed? And Amendment D will not be offered, correct, Council Lady Murphy?
Correct. In discussion with the administration, Amendment D messes up Amendment A, and so I'm not offering it at this time.
Thank you so much. Council Lady Allen.
Woman, lady, member. We've gone to gender neutral language now, Councilmember Allen. I just want to say I appreciate the amendment to make it effective July of 2019 because that solves the whole issue of possibly interfering with this year's budget so that we can think of this in a calm fashion. So with that amendment, I'm very supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we're on the bill as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Bill is recommended as amended. Mike is writing really fast. Now we're on BL 2018-1334, sponsors Henderson and Freeman, amends the Metro Code to impose the full privilege tax allowed under state law upon the sale of tickets to the events at the new Major League Soccer Stadium to eliminate general fund subsidy for debt service and to better support future maintenance. Councilwoman Henderson.
Thank you, Chair Vercher. I'm going to move to defer this indefinitely with a brief explanation, if I may.
Floor is yours.
I appreciate colleagues listening and reading this analysis here and the advantages of this approach. I appreciate Councilman Freeman's co-sponsorship and other colleagues who've expressed interest and support. The administration does not support this bill at this time, and so I need to do some more homework. I think it's important, colleagues, that we keep up with this issue so that we do not have a shortfall in our debt service for this stadium and that it pays for itself to the full extent that it can. My approach in this was to begin as we intend to go and make sure that we're using the full taxing authority of the state for that privilege tax on the tickets rather than phasing it in. And with that said, though, at this time, I don't think it's ready to move forward, but I hope colleagues will keep it in mind and that we can get a little more research done and bring it back later. With that, I renew my motion to defer indefinitely.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Henderson. There is a motion to defer indefinitely. All in favor? Opposed? Bill is deferred indefinitely, and we are adjourned.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.